You know what? I don't know if anyone thought about it, but you can't wage peace as a defense. It is like talking about dry water. You've got to find in you some way to recognize that Saddam Hussein is, at this very moment, the undefiled, unaltered, direct expression of God, and that anything else is an overlay, that either he is putting like a cloak over himself, or that you are putting like a cloak over him. And then take the cloak off. That's your task. To find a way to take the cloak off so that you can actually love. And then turn to God and say, God, fill me with the love. So that it fills me so full it overflows and blesses everyone. This isn't you using your mind to make something happen. This is you letting God use your mind to make something happen. And that's why you turn toward the altar, because you don't know how to use your mind to make something happen. Why? Because the you think you are at the moment is a three-dimensional object, and the third dimension is not where cause arises. That's why you turn toward the altar, so that God can move through you, so that God can use your mind to find expression, quote, in the dream, and thereby dissolve the dream. Does that answer your question?
Yes, thank you.
You are welcome. Okay. Actually, we always start here. Let's start in the back.
Special principles of miracle workers. The miracle abolishes the need for...
I'm sorry. This is, if you'll, as you read them, this is principle number 1.
Okay. Number 1. The miracle abolishes the need for lower order concerns.
And just for clarity, lower order would refer to the three-dimensional frame of reference and the kingdom of heaven as it appears to be seen through the three-dimensional frame lens, let's say. Continue.
Since it is an out-of-pattern time interval,
The miracle, that is,
the ordinary considerations of time and space do not apply.
which is why there can be a collapse of time.
When you perform a miracle, I will arrange both time and space to adjust to it.
And how do you perform a miracle? By letting God use your mind to embody His purpose. Not because you have said, I am going to make a miracle. You see? Okay.
Number 2. A clear distinction between what is created and what is made is essential. All forms of healing rest on this fundamental correction in level perception.
Okay. And for additional clarity, a clear distinction between what is created and what is made is essential. What is created is what God has created. What is made are the modifications to what God has created that we've talked about during the last 2 weeks. What you make, what you seem to be able to create, is nothing more than a modification of what actually exists. And your modification isn't even eternal. Okay. Microphone.
I asked a while back about DNA. So there's these two people standing there talking, and all of the words and the vibrating of the air and all of that's God's love. It's all spirit. And in their minds there's this perception of mutual agreements about language, and the conversation's made in the midst of creation.
That is true.
So, and I get this about a million years when we were talking about, the Last Judgment. Isn't the development of a tooth and a claw coming from a sense of lack? I mean, isn't what's going on? I mean, even though DNA is spirit, isn't there intent? Isn't a claw made? Isn't a tooth made versus created?
No. What's made is the use it's put to. So shall birds and sheep and frogs have toenails just like you? How boring. And how exquisite the design. If you look at each varied form as though it were a work of art that is there for appreciation because it is so exquisite. When you misperceive or give a strange definition to some part of creation, you do tend to cover up your capacity to discern and feel the meaning expressed as a tooth or a claw or a toenail. And I promise you all that there is nothing that is not glorious once you manage to abandon the confidence you have in the definitions you have given to claw and tooth and toenail.
I gotta look at the altar to see them.
That is correct. You have to look at the altar to see them. Continue.
The third special principles of a miracle worker: never confuse right and wrong-mindedness. Responding to any form of error with anything except a desire to heal is an expression of this confusion.
Exactly. It couldn't be stated any more clearly. Wrong-mindedness is constituted of Whatever goes on in your mind when your back is toward the altar and you have deprived yourself of the Father's perspective. And right-mindedness is what you spontaneously experience when you stop valuing your private perspective and genuinely and humbly and defenselessly ask for the Father's perspective. When I actually dictated this to Helen in principle number 2, I said all forms of correction, and then in parentheses, healing, rest on this fundamental correction in level perception. Correction, in its true meaning, is healing. And when you turn to the Father, and you are filled with right-mindedness, every thought directed to George Bush, every thought directed toward Saddam Hussein, and every thought you direct toward your ugly self will have as its intent healing. Because it's being extended to the Christ that the Father's perspective has revealed to you as them and as yourself. Amazing stuff. Continue.
Principle number 4. The miracle is always a denial of this error and an affirmation of the truth. Only right-mindedness can correct in a way that has any real effect.
And that is because right-mindedness originates from the level of cause, the Father's mind, the fourth dimensional conscious experience of being. Continue.
Pragmatically, what has no real effect has no existence. Its effect, then, is emptiness. Being without substantial content, it lends itself to projection.
Okay. Pragmatically, what has no real effect has no real existence. Its effect then is emptiness. Well, what about so-and-so who insulted you? What about so-and-so who treated you raunchy? What about so-and-so who made your life miserable? What about so-and-so who caused you great grief? Well, first of all, you see, if you're going to hold a grievance, it means that you think they actually could have done something that actually did hurt you. But I'm telling you that if you want to become free of the hurt that you say you have experienced, you are going to have to make this distinction between the Christ who was standing there all the time you were being treated grievously, and you're going to have to separate the claim that their presence seemed to make that there was a believer with a belief that he or she was suffering from that caused him or her to behave in a way that harmed you. Because if you cannot separate the innocent Christ from the false presentation, if you can't separate the false presentation from the Christ, you're not going to be able to see that what you thought they did to you and what they thought they were doing to you had to be magic and had to be an illusion. And until you can see that, you can't see that the suffering you have been experiencing is likewise an effect of magic and an illusion that you have bought into by believing that someone actually did some real magic. Do you understand what I'm saying? In your ability to make distinction between the Christ and the false sense of self that seemed to be overlaid on the Christ, until you can make that distinction, or when you make that distinction, you have laid the groundwork for that one to feel safe enough to allow a sudden shift of perception. And you have set yourself up for instantaneous release from the so-called damage that you were suffering from. And so you experience instantaneous healing as well. Question?
So when you are saying no, like we're saying no to Saddam, you are saying no to the belief and the believer.
That
You're
is
saying
correct.
no because, and in any situation that you need to say no, that's what you're saying, no to the thing that is the alteration of the truth,
Exactly.
not the person.
Exactly.
Okay.
And
Right.
just saying no isn't enough. You say no to the so-called believer and the beliefs that have made the believer behave unlovingly. But you do that as a part of the process of separating the believer and belief from the Christ, and then you be the presence of love toward the Christ. And if that seems to involve a process of re-education, if it seems to involve an ongoing process of extending love, of embodying love toward that Christ, and because it's love, finding that it comes out in a way that inspires the Christ that one is to come out of the closet, then you're being an agent for change. So it's not just a matter of saying no. It's saying no and yes. No to the idea that there's an evil person, separating the evilness from the Christ that it's been associated with. And then giving full attention, brotherly attention, caring attention, persistent attention to the Christ that is standing there, knowing, as I said before, that the Christ that is standing there is quite capable of comprehending and feeling what is whole and what is true and what is healthy and what is loving.
So it would be like if you are in an argument, like in a group, and the group is misbehaving, and you're a part of that. You all of a sudden realize, wait a minute, what are we doing here? And you speak up and say, no, I'm not going to play this anymore. We need to rethink this. And then hold on to that belief and refuse to participate in the game. And by doing that, that's what will help.
It will, as long as do not think you're talking to a bunch of contrary egos when you say, we need to rethink this. You may be saying no to the contrary egos, but when you say, we need to rethink this, you've got to know you're speaking to the Christ of each one of them. To that which is of excellence in the middle of each one of them, you see. So that in saying that, you are honoring them. Something which is very difficult for anyone to ignore. To be honored is something all of you usually respond to well. You see? You aren't even saying no to them. You're saying no to an illusion that everyone has succumbed to thinking is real. You're saying no to what is senseless.
Kind of like a cultural belief that you don't even know where that came from, but you've gone along with it because that's the way it always is, and then all of a sudden something wakes you up to, wait a minute.
Indeed.
Okay.
Yes.
If you don't follow up the no with the yes, then the person would still likely associate themselves with the part that made the no.
That is correct.
Okay.
Yes. The no and the yes better be simultaneously present. Else the no is nothing more than a defense. It's that simple. Let us continue.
Number 5, the level adjustment power of the miracle induces the right perception for healing.
Which is exactly what we've just been saying.
Until this has occurred, healing cannot be understood. Forgiveness is an empty gesture unless it entails correction.
Indeed. Which is healing.
Without this, it is essentially judgmental rather than healing.
Yes, like we were talking about last week, where it's a judgment against something. Whereas judgment is the distinction between what is real and what is not, and choosing for the real. Making the distinction between what is of value and what is valueless, and choosing for what is value, because what has become obviously valueless to you is something not any part of you would hang on to any longer, because you see that it serves you in no way. Okay.
I have a question about forgiveness. It's basically, you said it's the judgment followed by the healing, where first you discern and then you offer a healing.
Forgiveness is really the withdrawal of judgment upon your brother.
I don't mean that kind of judgment. I meant judgment as far as discernment.
Ask your question again.
Okay. Forgiveness is the process where first you discern what's real and what's not real, and then you offer a healing. Correct?
Yes, yes. You make the distinction between what is real and unreal, and then you address what is real in the individual.
Which is offering the healing.
Exactly, and that is an excellent way of describing forgiveness, yes.
Okay. And here's the thought that followed that for me, is that if you are not in physical presence of the person that you're forgiving, and since there are no private thoughts, can you then send a healing when you turn towards the altar?
You can't help but send healing.
Right, but you don't have to be in physical vicinity.
Absolutely not.
Okay.
And that doesn't constitute a personal power. It doesn't constitute a means of control.
Right.
The extension of love is spontaneous because it fills you and overflows. You can't contain it. And so not only the one you're thinking about, but everyone else is blessed as well. And you've got to let love do its work on its terms in the way that addresses the ignorance of the one being loved perfectly. Mm-hmm. In a way that allows for the sudden shift of perception that can get in through the back door, catching that one off guard so that there's a sudden aha. I've said before that the ego is nothing but a defense mechanism. And so anytime you inflict love on anyone for their good, you can count on it that they will be well defended immediately to object to the intrusion, to object to what they perceive to be an invasion of their privacy and an overriding of their free will. And mind you, your free will is very important to all of you, although it's becoming less. And so, you see, that's another reason it's important for you not to think you know what love is going to appear as, so that you can direct it in that way. Because love has to find the back door, has to find the place where there's a weak defense, so that it can sneak in, bringing light where it was dark, and that person experiences a light bulb going on. You've got to let love do its work in its way, on its terms, and you've got to trust that the Father's love is sufficient to the need. But you know what? You can't say, Father, please love him. Father, he needs your love. You've got to become involved, and you've got to say, Father, show me how to love him. Because the love has to be a gift in a relationship. It has to be the manifestation of caring. It has to be the manifestation of joining in brotherhood for reasons of brotherhood. This globe, this planet, is not going to arrive at peace and harmony until the reasons everyone relates to each other are reasons of love and brotherhood, to express and embody brotherhood. So that everyone does well because everyone cares about everyone else, not because they managed in the game of one-upmanship. You see? Okay. Let us continue.
Can I ask one quick question?
Yes. That wasn't quick enough.
In the job that I'm doing now, this seems like this is a very important thing to use, to practice.